Hey, welcome back for part 2 of our chocolate and Valentine's Day discussion. This week I'm going to talk a little bit about the question if chocolate is an aphrodisiac or not. So let's get right into it. Last week we talked about how chocolate and Valentine's Day came together. This week we're going to talk about chocolate as an aphrodisiac, so not so much the history, but more on the chemical, psychological side of it. So let's see, where do I want to start? Let's start out with what an aphrodisiac is. And first, let me say this. No food has ever been scientifically proven to stimulate human sexual organs. None, no food ever. There have been lots and lots of foods that are called aphrodisiacs, but they've never been shown to have an actual effect on sexual organs. So a lot of times, especially in botany, they will associate if a plant looks like something, then people would say, oh yeah, then that plant affects that. So if it looks like a heart, then they would say that it affected the heart. If it looked like a baby, then they would say it affected the baby. So here's some interesting foods that at some time in history were thought to be aphrodisiacs, or still may be thought to be aphrodisiacs. So these include things like onions, turnips, leeks, squash, pears, asparagus, artichokes, pomegranates, did I say pears already? Apples, figs, walnuts, and then you have the non-botanical things like eel, lobster, crab legs. Then you have things like spices, so cloves, cinnamon, ginger, what's one I'm missing? Pine nuts. Oh, and potatoes. Even at one point in time, potatoes were thought to be an aphrodisiac. So, and carrots too. So all of these foods that we now think of kind of as commonplace were at one time thought to be an aphrodisiac, or may still be thought to be an aphrodisiac. So people attribute aphrodisiac properties to all kinds of things. So usually, historically, an aphrodisiac falls into one of 5 categories. The first one is hot foods. So things like chilies, things that are spicy because they're supposed to ignite passion. The second one is what I talked about with botany. It looks like something, so it must affect that something. You can use your imagination for that one. 3 is the reproductive hypothesis. So, for example, if you eat eggs, then it will help in your reproduction. So because whatever you were eating is part of the reproduction of something else, it helps your reproduction. 4, if it's exotic, then it's erotic. So foods that are unique, foods that are new, foods that are from exotic locations, they often, when they're first introduced, fall into the aphrodisiac category. And the last one is that it stimulates senses. So those are the historically you can usually group an aphrodisiac into one of those 5 categories. Now cacao historically falls into the if it's exotic, it's erotic category, because it was when the Spanish came to North and Central America and conquered those cultures, they brought cacao back to Europe, and it was really only available in Spain for a certain amount of time. Then it was really only available to the aristocracy for a certain amount of time. And so because it had limited availability, both in coming from an exotic locale and limited to the aristocracy, an erotic or an aphrodisiac nature was subscribed to it. Now, there is also often a chemical, because it has certain chemicals, it's given an aphrodisiac. It's cited as being an aphrodisiac. So let's talk about the chemicals in cacao. So cacao has a lot of chemicals. We're not going to talk about all of them. We're going to talk about the top 4 that are usually implicated in the aphrodisiac properties of cacao. So they are tryptophan, phenylethylamine or PEA, theobromine, and caffeine. So those are the top 4 that are usually implicated in aphrodisiac properties. Now, let me tell you a little bit about one of them. Let's talk about phenylethylamine first. So in the 1980s, there were 2 doctors at a New York State psychiatric hospital or institute that suggested that phenylethylamine or PEA is produced in the brain when you have feelings, emotional feelings of love and satisfaction and feeling loved. And so that became what was called the love hormone, the love drug, something like that. Chocolate has PEA. You can do a simple chemical analysis. It's there. You can see it. So they thought maybe digesting phenylethylamine or PEA would give you these feelings of love, of being loved, the same feeling that you get from actually having a relationship. Doesn't quite work that way. When you ingest something versus when you produce it in your own brain, it works differently. PEA cannot cross the brain-blood barrier. Only its substrates can. So it's when you ingest it, it's pretty much orally inactive. There can be some instances where other things interact and it changes, but it's pretty much orally inactive. It has a half-life of 5 to 10 minutes when you ingest it. So that means half of it is gone in 10 minutes. So in another 10 minutes, the rest of it will be gone. So it breaks down pretty quickly when you ingest it. So does it have an aphrodisiac effect? Not really. You would not really at all. Later studies showed that even if you were the biggest chocoholic on the planet, that PEA consumption really wouldn't have, it didn't affect, there wasn't an increase in the blood, so it really didn't affect you in a psychological way. So that's phenylethylamine. Let's talk about tryptophan. Tryptophan is an amino acid. Maybe you've heard of tryptophan because that's sometimes when they talk about if you eat a big Thanksgiving meal, there's a lot of tryptophan afterwards. Again, nah. It is an amino acid. It is a precursor to serotonin, which has antidepressant effects. Again, it depends on the amount you eat. And really, in a chocolate bar, you don't really eat enough to really have any significant effect, antidepressant effect. So not only not an aphrodisiac, it's not really an antidepressant either. So you don't get enough by eating a chocolate bar. Even if you eat a lot of chocolate bars, you really don't get enough to affect you as tryptophan acting as an aphrodisiac in cacao. The 2 other ones are alkaloids. They are theobromine and caffeine. They are both central nervous system stimulants. Theobromine is a weak central nervous stimulant. It's a vasodilator. It's a cardiac stimulant, amongst other things. When you've ingested theobromine, it takes about 2 hours to have peak absorption. So if you're counting on it being an aphrodisiac, you're going to have to wait a while. And caffeine, and really there's not huge amounts of theobromine. If you're eating it over time. There may be a cumulative effect, but eat a piece of chocolate feeling aphrodisiac? No, that's not the way that works. Caffeine, also an alkaloid, is central nervous stimulant, also cardiac and respiratory stimulant. Its peak absorption is about 30 minutes after you eat it. It's not really, is it an aphrodisiac? Not exactly. It doesn't affect sexual organs. It may give you a little stimulation to your heartbeat, but again, the amount of caffeine that is in a chocolate bar or the amount that you would ingest in one sitting is probably not enough to have such an effect on you. So why do we all think this? Why do we all think chocolate is an aphrodisiac? It probably has more to do with cultural associations and psychological associations. So think about, first off, receiving a gift. Think about just the idea of receiving a gift. Think about how that makes you feel. It really ignites the brain's reward centers, releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine. So just the idea of a gift makes you feel good. And the brain then also releases oxytocin, which is a precursor of serotin, which reduces stress. So just the idea of receiving a gift has these effects on your brain chemically. Now, if that gift is chocolate or if that gift is something else, it's a gift. But at Valentine's Day, a lot of times the gift is chocolate. And so there could be some association there as that, therefore, chocolate is an aphrodisiac. So that's more of a correlation than a causation. Let's see what else. Then we also have, there could be a placebo effect that's going on. But it also could be a cultural thing. Like I said before, if it's exotic, it's erotic. So usually when something new comes in, it has these connotations with it of being an aphrodisiac. But over time, as it reaches more people, reaches a different class of people, that association lessens. I don't know that that's happened so much with chocolate. But with chocolate, you also have cultural associations like in advertising or in movies. So even in early non-speaking movies, you have, for example, in 1933, you have Jean Harlow in the movie, what's it called? Dinner at 8. You can Google this. Maybe I'll put a link to it. So Jean Harlow, she is sitting on this bed covered with satin sheets. She's got a little heart pillow behind her. She's pouting and being all girly. and then they cut to her eating this out of this decadent box of chocolates, eating all sensually. And so it sets up a situation that chocolate has been dumped into this cultural connotation of what chocolate is or should be. That's what happened during the Middle Ages, when you have all the paintings with chocolate and women posed in sensual ways. And even today, that still happens. You have 1907, you have Hershey's Kisses being made. They say that they were called kisses because of the sound the machine made when it made a smooching sound when it manufactured them, so that's why they called them kisses. But it still has that connotation behind it. What else do I have to say about that? Oh, there have been studies done on chocolate and women's sexuality. So in 2006, I have one from 2006 where they studied chocolate and a correlation between chocolate and women's sexual health. And so this was done, I believe, in Italy. And they took 163 women surveyed them on their recreational habits and assessed them on their sexual function using the female sexual function index. They compared the two groups of one eating a significant amount of chocolate and the other one eating less or no chocolate. At first, there appeared to be an actual difference. But when they adjusted for age, the average age was 35, but when they adjusted for age, it turned out, let me read you their conclusions. So it is alluring to hypothesize that chocolate can have either a psychological or a biological positive impact on women's sexuality. In our sample, women reporting chocolate consumption have a higher FSFI score than women who do not eat chocolate. But when the data are adjusted for age, the scores are similar regardless of chocolate consumption. So basically, chocolate had no effect on women's sexual function or sexual distress. So there's some science behind it saying that there's no actual physiological aphrodisiac properties of chocolate, but there are some psychological things that come into play when you're talking about chocolate and being an aphrodisiac. Now, there is also some misogynistic undertones to this. I just recently saw on Instagram a Russian pastry chef posted a naked woman being covered in chocolate, and I don't know, that there's fine associated with gift giving and that sort of thing, but that bothers me on that level. So that's the quick one today. When I talk about the chocolate, is it or is it not an aphrodisiac? I'm gonna say not, but I still really like to eat chocolate, and I wouldn't mind getting chocolate on Valentine's Day. So I hope that you share chocolate with someone on Valentine's Day just because you like chocolate and you like them. And that's the video for today. If you like to hear information about chocolate, make sure to subscribe and like this video, and you'll get one every Thursday. We'll talk more about all things chocolate, and I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching.